So thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm glad to present you some epigraphic data concerning the Roman military presence in this region. The relation of the Greek cities of this region, Tyras and Olbia, with Rome started after the death of Beribista in 44 BC and the subsequent rapid collapse of his kingdom. The fall of Beribista's kingdom paved the way for the reconstruction of the Greek coastal cities, which he had destroyed, including, of course, Olbia and Tyras. But this reconstruction did not take place immediately. The Romans understood well the importance of the Danubian territories, but before the end of the civil war, they had no time for that rather remote region. The situation changed after the end of civil war, and the Roman armies made a number of successful campaigns in these territories, first conquering the barbarian peoples of the hinterland, and then taking control of the Greek cities of the western Black Sea. This was the result of the campaign of Publius Vinicius in 332 BC. I recently published an inscription from Olbia showing that the city, lying in ruins for about 40 years after the destruction by Beribista, was rebuilt at this time, and probably rebuilt on the initiative of Publius Vinicius. And the same inscription shows that the Romans played a decisive role in its restoration. A building connected with Augustus' cult, probably a temple, was one of the first constructions in the restored city. It is attested by the earliest inscription of the post-Getae Olbia dating earlier than AD 4, which you can see on the screen. The second earliest inscription of that period, dating from the late 14 or early 15, is also a dedication of a building to emperors Augustus and Tiberius. This shows the highest level of Olbia's proximity to Rome. It can be assumed that Tyras was rebuilt at the same time. We have no inscriptions, but the archaeological data confirm this assumption. After the restoration, Tyras and Olbia remained at first formally outside the empire, thought controlled by Rome. But in 56-57, their paths had diverged. Tyras was officially incorporated in the province of Moesia, created under Augustus, but expanded eastwards close to Tyras a dozen years before. The incorporation of Tyras into the empire was marked by the minting of coins depicting personified Roman Senate, the emperor and the Roman eagle. The date of this event is surely established because the city introduced a local era, which was used for dating a number of later inscriptions, together with two other dating systems, including Roman consuls. Thus, the starting point of this era is quite clear. The legal status of Tyras within the Roman Empire is not entirely clear, but most likely it was a civitas libera. Police institutions, even slightly transformed, continue to function. Citizens of Tyras enjoyed freedom from taxation in several categories, including the portorium, the custom duty on imported and exported goods, and of course this was a considerable privilege. Around the same time, the Romans established control over the Danube crossing, which were of great strategic importance. The most convenient, if not the only, crossing of the Danube in its lower reaches after the mouth of the Prut River is situated near the village of Orlovka, or Kartal, in the Reni district of the Odessa region. Whether traveling from the south to the territories between the Dniester, Prut and Danube, or in the opposite direction, one had to pass this place. Unsurprisingly, this key point was being occupied since Hoary antiquity, starting in the Chalcolithic and down the modern period. The Romans also could not fail to appreciate its importance. From the south, the crossing was controlled by Noviodunum near the modern town of Isikcha, which became the main base of the Flavian-Mercian fleet. On the opposite bank, the Romans built a castellum and a number of fortifications and structures connected with it. Here you see the situation of this castellum. It is situated on a hill called the Stony Hill and located 1 kilometer to the north of the riverbed. The entire area around it was transformed into a powerful defensive complex by a complex system of earth walls, protecting the Danube crossing from the north. The Romans occupied the area and built the castellum in the middle of the 1st century AD, first destroying the Getae fortress that had occupied this hill until then. Tyras was incorporated into the province of Moesia about at the same period, the same time. Apparently, Tyras was also included in the same defense system. It was a kind of outpost providing control over the far approaches to the Danube. Olbia, given its more remote position, apparently could not be part of that system and was not incorporated into the province. Both cities housed Roman garrisons, but the periods of their deployment in each case was not the same. In Tyras, it is reliably attested by an inscription dated to AD 116-17. It speaks on the construction works performed by the 5th Macedonian Legion and its auxiliary detachment, that is, by the garrison of Tyras. These dates give us, of course, only terminus ante quem. It is indeed difficult to imagine a situation where a Greek city incorporated in the Roman Empire and located on the border and on a quite dangerous border would have been left without military protection. It can therefore be assumed that Roman troops appeared in Tyras at the same time as its incorporation into the province, that is in AD 56-7. The situation with Olbia was quite different. The empire did not incorporate it and thus did not take an obligation to defend it. We have no clear evidence to suggest that there was a Roman garrison in Olbia before the middle of the 2nd century AD. Those attempts have been made to find such evidences. So Yuri Vinogradov restored the name of Trajan in the epitaph of Athenocles, son of Athenocles, a foot soldier of some unit armed with large shields, and suggested that this was a Roman auxiliary unit sent to Olbia by Trajan. However, the supposed form of the emperor's name, Traianos, with first theta and double nu, is nowhere attested and hardly could exist. The context in which it is mentioned is also highly untypical. So it is very unlikely that a Roman soldier was mentioned in this inscription. Thus, we have no data allowing us to suppose that Roman soldiers were stationed in Olbia in the first half of the 2nd century AD. This is, of course, does not mean that they could not have appeared here episodically, in connection with some kind of military operations. The general situation, in my opinion, testifies rather to the absence of the permanent Roman garrison in Olbia. This situation corresponds well to a special relation with the Sarmatians, which the city developed in the 2nd half of the 1st century. I am speaking about minting of coins by the king Pharzoius and his heir Insimeus, and the appearance at about the same time of a large number of people bearing Sarmatian names in Olbia's elite. Apparently, the decision of the Roman authorities not to take over the defense of the city and leave it to the Olbian own force also led to a weakening of ties with Rome. Dio Chrysostom at the end of the century speaks of the existence of anti-Roman sentiments in the city. With all the possible caveats concerning the rhetorical nature of his writing, we can assume that it really existed and is due to this disappointment in Roman policies. The earliest clear evidence of the presence of Roman troops in Olbia is the military diploma of a veteran of the Mysian fleet, dated to 8 February 157. This object is to be connected with the information provided by the Scriptores Historiae Augustae, according to which Antoninus Pius sent troops to Pontus to help the Olbia.
Askold, вы выключили микрофон, никто не слышит сейчас. Минуточку тому назад. О, хорошо, спасибо.
Now it's okay. I was speaking about the sending of the Roman troops in Olbia and the military diploma. It was heard or not?
Only the last two sentences were disappeared, so you can continue just.
Okay, thank you. So this diploma is probably connected, it should be connected with the information of the Scriptores Historiae Augustae, according to which Antoninus Pius sent troops to Pontus to help Olbia in the war against the Taurocitians. This report testifies, among others, that the fact that there was no Roman garrison in Olbia before these events. It is likely that the mission of the sent troops was not a one-time action, but resulted in the deployment of a Roman garrison in Olbia. The construction of the citadel, which evidently served as a place of its deployment, is probably connected with the appearance of the Roman garrison, and dates from the middle and the second half of the 2nd century. The Roman barracks, recently identified by Roman Kozlenko in the lower city, also dates to the same time. So the Roman garrison in Tyras apparently appeared immediately after its incorporation into the empire in AD 56-7, and if it is at first attested by an inscription 60 years later, even if it's attested by this later inscription. But in Olbia, the situation was different, and the garrison was established only under Antoninus Pius in the 40s or first half of the 50s of the 2nd century. Initially, the garrisons of the Greek cities around the Black Sea, especially Tyras and Olbia, were in the area of responsibility of the 5th Macedonian Legion. In Tyras, its soldiers were the main part of the garrison, and it was headed by its centurion. The garrison also included soldiers of some auxiliary units and ships of Moesian fleet, the main base of which was located nearby in Novia Dunu. It is likely that the situation in Olbia was the same during the reign of Antoninus Pius. Later, this legion was relocated from Lower Moesia to Dacia. The exact date of this relocation is not entirely clear. We know that in 168 it was already stationed in Dacia, and in 162 to 66 it fought in the war against Parthia in the army of Lucius Verus, from where it was apparently sent directly to Dacia. Tadeusz Tarnowski hypothesizes that in 162 the legion had been sent to the east not in full, and that small vacillationes comprising its warriors remained in Tyras and Olbia, while their command was passed on to centurions of other legions. It is this transitional period that, according to Tarnowski, explained the existence in Tyras of a mixed garrison staffed with soldiers of all three legions of Lower Moesia, and headed by a centurion no longer of the 5th Macedonian, but of the 1st Italic Legion. This situation is attested by a tile stamp, which you can see in the crown. A similar mixed garrison, but under the command of a centurion of 11th Claudia Legion, is also attested in Olbia by one inscription. Thus, the complete withdrawal of the legion from Lower Moesia, including its Black Sea vexillones, should be dated between 162 and 167. It's worth of mentioning that apart from the mentioned inscriptions, the soldiers of the 5th Macedonian Legion are not attested in Olbia, which once again testifies to the late appearance of the Roman troops here, shortly before the legion was withdrawn from Lower Moesia. The responsibility for the Roman garrisons in the Black Sea was transferred to the 1st Legio Italica. They were formed from the soldiers of the legions legion and commanded by its centurion. The garrisons continue to include the ships of the Moesian fleet, as well as the soldiers of the 11th Claudia and Auxilia. Apparently, from that time onwards, the garrisons of the two cities were very close in composition and status. Despite the long presence of Roman garrisons in Tyros and later in Olbia, there was no substantial Romanization among the city's population. Latin was used exclusively by the Roman soldiers, while the city's population and magistrates employed Greek, even the official correspondence with provincial authorities. This, of course, did not prevent many of the city's elite from obtaining Roman citizenship, as evidenced by their names. But there is a clear difference between two cities. Among the surviving inscriptions of the Roman period found in Tyros, almost half were written in Latin, which obviously shows the great role of the garrison in the life of the city. In Olbia, the situation is quite different. Only about 24 Latin inscriptions are attested here, which is about 5%. The Roman garrisons of Tyras and Olbia certainly took part in military activities in their immediate vicinity, but we know little about these events from epigraphic sources. One such case is known to us, and I will discuss it more in detail. Until recently, it was assumed that one of the major events in the history of the region was the defeat of the Carpi by the Romans, including the troops of Tyras garrison, which took place in AD 215 near the modern village of Belinka to the south of Tyras. The reconstruction of these events is based on two inscriptions from Oscus in honor of Titus Aurelius Flavinus, primipilus of a legion and member of councils of several cities of Moesia, as well as in the west. This person was rewarded by Caracalla with 75,000 sesterces and a promotion for his military merits. The first inscription was published in 1900 by Alfred von Domaszewski. From the name of the enemies against whom Flavinus had acted, only the first letter C has survived, as you can see on the photo. Von Domaszewski suggested a restoration of Carpos. From the ancient authors, it was known that Caracalla, before the campaign to the east stopped in Dacia, took hostages from the Dacians and fought against Getae. These events were dated 214, and von Domaszewski assumed that the inscription mentioned them. On the basis of this restoration, it quickly became generally accepted that the Carpi had appeared on the frontiers of the empire under Caracalla and has been defeated by him in 214. However, in 1960, Dimitri Tudor examined the inscription and noticed that after C there is no traces of A, and on the contrary, the upper corner of E is visible. Thus, he proposed a restoration Kennos, and suggested that the inscription is speaking not about Dacia and Lower Moesia, but about the service of Flavinus in the West, during which he received the title of Decurion of Aquincum. 10 years later, Boris Gerov compared this inscription with another inscription from Oscus and established that it was also made in honor of the same person. In the second inscription, the name of Tyras was preserved in its entirety in the same context, and this allowed him to read in both texts the phrase res Tyrae Gestae, events in Tyras. Accordingly, the context of the events turned out to be undoubtedly Danubian, and Gerov returned to the Domashevsky reconstruction of Carpus, which confirmed the traditional point of view on the Carpi raid in 214. Soon afterwards, in 1975, an altar with a Latin dedication from the military sailor Ulpius Valens, dated to the 214, was found during the excavations of Tyras. Tereshkovsky, who published the inscription, drew attention to the coincidence of its date with the date of the presumed defeat of the Carpi, and suggested that Ulpius Valens took part in the battle. In 1973, two inscriptions, a Greek tombstone of Laestenus and a Latin dedication, were found in the village of Belenkoye, near Belgorod-Dnistrovsky. Tereshkovsky compared them with the above-mentioned data and assumed that both inscriptions were found in situ, and it was the place of Belenkoye where a decisive battle with Carpi had been fought. Finally, in 1986, Igor Bruyaka, who had excavated a burial ground in the same village Belenkoye, discovered another inscription, as well as a Roman relief without an inscription. The inscription dates back to AD 217, and
Askold, I'm sorry, but you switched the screens. We are seeing. Мы видим сейчас только ваш компьютер, не презентацию.
Okay. I'm doing nothing, but it's.
То кто-то может другой просто включился. Хорошо. И сейчас еще раз надо просто перечислить все на... вот, сейчас все хорошо, все в порядке, извините.
Okay. Igor Bruyaka, during his excavations in Belenkoye, found an inscription which dates back to 217 and is in the name of the centurion of the Roman legion, from which the prenomen and nomen Titus Aurelius are preserved with, while the cognomen disappeared. Bruyako and his co-author Rosohatsky, in their publication of the inscription, suggested that it was the same Titus Aurelius Flavinus who is mentioned in the inscriptions of Oscus. The Tereshkovsky hypothesis was developed and acquired a definitive form. According to this hypothesis, the Roman army led by Caracalla defeated the Carpi in 214 at the site of the future village of Belenkoye. The garrison of Tyras and the city militia, led by Titus Aurelius Flavinus, centurion of the First Italian Legion, played, according to this hypothesis, an important role in the battle. Its commander was generously rewarded by Caracalla for units. And a sort of war memorial was erected at the site of the victory, to which all the inscriptions found there belong. Some of the dead were buried at the site of the battle. Among them lay Stennis. The hypothesis is beautiful, but as it often happens with hypotheses built on the lacunae restorations in inscriptions, it does not stand up to clash with the facts. The first question is, how sure is that the enemy was the Carpi? As we remember, their name appeared from von Domashevsky's restoration of the inscriptions of Oscus. This restoration based on a single letter is, however, problematic, as it was already remarked by Tudor. We don't hear from the sources anything about the activity of the Carpi on the frontier of the empire until AD 238, and they are not mentioned anywhere in connection with Caracalla. More importantly, the upper corner of E is distinguishable on the stone, which rolls out the restoration carpus. But the restoration kenos proposed by Tudor is not suitable either. A convincing solution was suggested in 1997 by Dilyana Botiva. She suggested reading Getae. This is entirely consistent with the Scriptoris Historiae Augustae information about Caracalla defeated the Getae. So the Carpi should be replaced by Getae. The second question is the date of the event. Dating of these events to AD 214 has long been generally accepted. But in 1998, John Scheidt established at the basis of new inscriptions that Caracalla arrived at Nicomedia in Asia no later than the second half of December 213. Accordingly, the entire journey from Germania to Asia, including his stay in the Danube, fell within the short period between September and December 213. His stay on the Danube was very brief, and his participation in the fighting against the Getae was probably nominal, although he could certainly have had time to reward the victors. In any case, it is clear that the battle in question dates back to 213, not 14. As a result, the assumption of Koreshkovsky that the dedication of the sailor Ulpius Valens refers to this offense loses grounds. Its only basis was indeed a coincidence of dates, and now it became clear that the battle and the inscription were separated by 1 year. The third question is where the battle took place. Its localization at Belinka was based on Koreshkovsky's assumption that the two inscriptions found there were in situ. But the subsequent excavations conducted by Bruyako have shown that this was not the case. He excavated a burial ground of Chernyakov culture dating to the 4th century, and all ancient stones, with and without inscriptions, were used secondary, as a material of grave constructions. Bruyako suggests that they stood nearby and were part of a war memorial at the site of the victory. However, the content and nature of three inscriptions from Belinka speaks against this assumption. You can see these inscriptions on the ecran. The tradition of erecting trophies at the site of victories is indeed well known, but no one of these inscriptions the inscriptions from Belinka fits such a context, and none of them mention a military victory. The first altar is a dedication of the temple to God Invincible, made by Gaius Servilius Ponticus and his children. Unlike the other Latin inscriptions from Tyras, there is no indication here that the dedicator belonged to the Roman army, which would be expected in such a context, and he was most likely a civilian member of Roman provincial administration. Neither the status of the dedicant nor the dedicated structure, a temple, is suitable for a battlefield, but they fit well in an urban context. This second inscribed altar also does not mention a battle and represent a typical ex voto dedication. It is the only dated inscription of the three found in Belinka, and its date is AD 217. That is 4 years after the battle, adding further doubts that it could be associated with the victory. Finally, the Greek tombstone is adorned with a relief representation of a female bust, which once again is hardly compatible with a hypothetical burial of a fallen warrior. It should also be noted, however, that Belinka is not the only place outside Belgorod where inscriptions of Tyras have been found. Some inscriptions, certainly belonging to Tyras, including the most famous ones, like the letter of the governor of Lower Moesia, Vinis Tertullus, to the authorities of Tyras, were found quite far from Belgorod. Two of them come from the nearby villages of Chobruchi and Koropne, located at a distance of about 70 and 60 kilometers to the north of Belgorod. One inscription was found near the village of Divizia, about 40 kilometers southwest, and another one in the village of Shabo, 8 kilometers to the south of the city. The archaeological context of the finds provides the explanation for their presence at the site of Belinkoe, as well as in other mentioned find spots. The ancient stones, both inscribed and epigraphic, were used as building material for the construction of burials of the 4th century BC. In all find spots, for which our information about the context is not complete, sites of the Chernihiv culture are known. The ruins of Tyras probably served as quarries for Chernihiv people of this period. Bored stone of good quality, including inscribed panels and reliefs, could be used as building material in areas where it could be easily transported by water. This may explain the discovery of inscriptions from Tyras at places to various extent removed from the city, but always located near the water and close to barbarian burial sites and settlements of the 4th century AD. So what remains of the hypothesis I spoke about? It can be assumed that the Roman troops defeated the Getae, not the Carpi, in the region of Tyras in AD 213. Titus Aurelius Flavinus, one of the senior centurions of an unknown legion, played an important role in the battle and possibly led the Roman army. After the victory, he was awarded by Caracalla and became primipilus. He did not serve in the garrison of Tyras and had no special links to it, although he received the honorary title of Buleotes of the city as well as a number of other ones. Where exactly the battle took place, we don't know. The two inscriptions from Oscus are the only epigraphic sources of information. No inscription from Tyras can be connected with these events with any confidence. So what remains to be said is the end of the stay of Roman garrison in Tyras and Olbia. In Tyras, the latest dated inscription in Latin is from 217, in Greek from 222-35. According to Natalia Son, in the middle of the 3rd century, the entire city burned down in the course of a barbarian raid, probably carried out by Goths. In the 270s, city life resumed and continued until the next invasion in the second half of the 4th century. But the reconstruction was chaotic and covered only a part of the original territory, where inhabited dwellings stood next to the ruins. Neither the status of Tyras nor the composition of its population in this period are known. It is likely that it was controlled and probably populated not by the Greeks, by the people of Chernihiv culture. It was a kind of squatter settlement on the ruins of a Greek town, which served the inhabitants as quarries. Of course, there were no Roman troops in the city at these times. And we just heard about the archaeological data of the city of this period in the talk by Oleg Saveli. As for Olbia, the latest Latin inscriptions testifying the presence of Roman troops are dated 248 and 249-50. Soon after that, the Roman troops were also withdrawn from Olbia. In the middle of the 3rd century, the castellum near Orlovka was also abandoned. Obviously, withdrawal of the troops from Tyras, Olbia, and even from the fortifications situated on the Danube, which controlled the crossing, were a simultaneous and coordinated action. I think the Greek cities had no chances of surviving without Roman military support. Valentina Krapivina dated the destruction of Olbia to 269-70. Life resumed here later, but whether this settlement was Greek or barbarian, as was the case in Tyras, is, I understand well, an open question. And I'm finishing, and in conclusion, a little publicity I allow me to make. I'm happy to announce that the first volume of the new corpus of the inscriptions of North Pontic area, which my colleagues and me have been working on for many years, came out. It's published in English, and its Russian version will be published before the end of this year. It is devoted to the inscriptions of Tyras and other sites of the region between Danube and the Dniester, and includes 122 numbers. By comparison, Latishev's corpus has only 19 numbers for this region, which shows the growth of the material over the past century. It's more than 10 times more. And this is the website of the publisher who published this one and will probably publish the next volumes of the series of the news editions of the news edition in Bordeaux. Thank you very much.